So, in just a few weeks, IEM Cologne 2022 will start. Arguably the biggest event in Counter-Strike every year. It's something that all fans tune into every single year. And this year is no different from the others with an incredibly stacked lineup of teams. Teams already at the event are Navi, NIP, G2, ENCE, Faze, Liquid, Cloud9, and Furia. And then in the play-in, teams of note are Vitality, Heroic, Spirit, Big, Astralis. And there's a few other teams up there too that are ranked really highly, but it's almost guaranteed to deliver as it does every single year.
Yeah, there with the amount of good teams in the play-in and how bad some of the teams that we consider to be tier one orgs have been playing, like the likes of Astralis, they are not a guarantee to make it through that stage of the event. And with Cologne being like a near major level tournament, definitely an S tier tournament, you really want to see how many of these rosters are going to stick together if they bomb out of the event. Namely, Astralis. I know Liquid are playing with Yakindar and they're not in the play-in, so that's really good for them. And I think Liquid might actually have a decent showing given that Yakindar is standing in.
Yeah, I
But
definitely think some of the highlights here would be Liquid having Yakindar, and this is their first event and possibly only event together, and Navi having some more time with SDY will definitely be something people will be looking into as they looked really good with him at Blast, I believe it was, or whatever this most recent event was, and they didn't have much time to prep. And then I think the one I'm most interested in is Heroic with their new pickup. They picked up Jabby and they got rid of Refresh.
yeah, and you also have to think ENCE has Sphinx again. I don't know if they've played an official since IEM Dallas where they didn't have him. I think they did, but there also a lot of people are gonna forget about them once again. And obviously, Phase have been regressing a bit, and G2 is always so random which G2 shows up to an event.
Yeah, it's definitely an issue they have. But Nico has stated in recent interviews that they're making progress towards where they want to be, which is good to hear.
Yeah, I feel like Nico though always gives those types of interviews, and then when you watch him in game, he's always the first one to tilt and clearly gets frustrated with his teammates. But with the development of Monacy, I think he's been playing on the team for a little over 8 months now, maybe 6 months. He's been their star player, best player, I think, in a definitely from the eye test. I don't know if rating wise, but I think Furia and Nip being two teams already in Cologne that are in the main stage of the event, I think they're going to be two interesting teams that are going to upset a lot of these favorites in the event.
It's also worth noting that all the teams that have qualified for the event already will be playing teams that qualified through the play-in. So a lot of these teams that are already in the event are going to have some pretty tough first round matchups that may see them enter the lower bracket right off the bat.
And you also see with this style where there's teams that play through a play-in, the teams that are already through, they haven't played in a week, whereas the play-in teams, they've been fresh, they've played in officials the whole week prior, and they're definitely a lot more on point than some of these teams that are just trying to get into the groove of the event. So I see a team like Liquid definitely struggling with that as it's their first time playing with that roster. And Furia, they might also struggle because I don't think they've played in an official in a little while. Definitely not against tier one teams.
They actually played one the other day in the ESL, the Challenger League, I think they
Yeah,
call it.
yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
I think also, again, going back to Heroic, it's interesting because these teams that already qualified will see how Jabby fits in. And with the little amount of time, I'm sure these players will be able to point out inconsistencies in their gameplay. And I think he can really expect to be like exploited in his playstyle when if he gets through to the main event.
Yeah, it depends how Heroic is treating this addition of a player. Is it gonna be like a plugin, like you're gonna do exactly what Refresh does, or if they want to change their style up a bit? Because clearly they've hit a brick wall. They cannot get past the semi and quarterfinals of events anymore. Definitely not on LAN. Unlike Cloud9, who those two teams ran the online era, Cloud9 have seemingly figured it out, and I think Heroic really want to get the ball rolling. But I think without having a superstar opera, like Cadian's a good opera, but not a superstar opera. I don't know how far that team can go even with Chabby.
Yeah, especially with just the way other IGLs have been calling lately. You have Electronic, who's calling incredibly. You have Snappy, who's just been, I don't even know where to start with Snappy. And then there's obviously Kerrigan. And Alexi B is starting to come into his own. So Cadian, he might have a little too much on his plate, in my opinion.
Yeah. Now let's do an early prediction of who you think are gonna win the tournament. I think I'm gonna go with FaZe. I think they're gonna figure it out for this event, and I think they'll break the ice and win and get another notch on that Grand Slam.
I'm not gonna lie, I'm going with Navi here because when you look at
Is
their bracket, they'll play the winner of NIP versus whoever NIP get paired up against, and I think out of all the teams in the play-in, Navi will also handle any of them, and then NIP on top of that pretty easily. So I think they'll have a pretty decent boost into the upper final right off the bat.
Simple did say he doesn't even want to just be number one in the world. He wants to beat FaZe for it. So I think it's definitely a storyline there. And those two teams, I really hope they don't bomb out. I mean, Navi rarely ever bombs out. They typically lose if they are in the finals. So I'm super, super hyped for that matchup.
And I think a dark horse pick, I don't even know if you can consider them dark horse anymore, are Ents. Like, they're rated, I believe, number 3 in the world right now. They're up
Yeah,
there,
they are.
but it's just nobody ever picks them to win tournaments for whatever reason. And I think they have a real good chance to prove themselves at the top here.
My dark horse is Liquid because they have Yekindar, and I think that's gonna be a really good fit. And no one knows they're complete wild card, so I think I go with Liquid for a nice dark horse.
I
Probably
also
have a 2% chance of winning.
I also want to talk about for a second Complexity, as their rating has fallen terribly. They're in the play-in. They're at
Yeah, they're
33.
awful. They're awful.
And yeah, I think if this is another extremely disappointing event, well, honestly, I think either way, I think the roster changes are gonna come in. I think they're finally gonna make the junior change and possibly Fang as well.
I. It's nice to know that Grim is still playing well, though. That is a nice factor because I think you can build a team around him and Floppy. And
Yeah,
JT's okay, but Junior is just abysmal. Like I cannot believe he is the offer they chose to go with, but it is what it is.
yeah, it's a shame to see the number 2 team in NA struggle this badly.
Yeah.
All right,